I asked me some time ago to speak a bit about the archetypes that make up our story that has basically shaped the life that we have now. Um, it's something that isn't particularly it's it's not like Carl Jung invented them. I mean, they're as old as our species is. It's just the same the symbols that we make to make sense out of life are often the same characters that we see showing up in stories. From the earliest mythologies, like the story of Gilgamesh, all the way up to the Marvel series. Um, so as it were, it's just these are they aren't actual images, the archetypes. They're, I guess you would call them patterns or motifs that we see cropping up. The archetypes, I guess you can acquaint them also to Plato's, realm of forms, where everything they aren't actual things. We can't interact with them, but it's just the idea, which would be the perfect example of a particular thing or person or characteristic or whatever. Um, um, since we're talking about personal characteristics, well then we're looking at these archetypes in our stories as they pertain to um, the development of that particular kind of character in a mythic context, in a symbolic context. Um, so there are quite a few. There are the archetypes of the everyman. That's someone who's kind of introverted, just well, it's not someone, but it's that characteristic of just blending into the crowd, being one of the crowd, being like everyone else. And another, which is probably the most famous one, is the trickster, the jester, the one who just has that little bit of uncertainty that is going to make things interesting. And tricksters can be either all the archetypes. They can be positive and negative, but there are no archetypes that are completely villain and then the good. It's the collective unconscious is not Manichaean. It does not have a definite good and a definite bad. It's always it's sort of an equilibrium. You know. So you also got the hero of the lover. That's pretty. It's mostly self-explanatory. It's like the lover is someone who's willing to give himself over to something higher, something in union, to become a part of something greater. It is our idea of romantic love, but not just. Um, then we come to the magician. The magician is someone who's clever. He's got the use of tools. He can manipulate elements. He can or she can. I mean, these are totally genderless here. Um, uh, uh, provide solutions to problems through technical means. Then, of course, as I said, all these archetypes have negative and positive poles. You can have the magician who's basically using his talents for himself, and then there's the one who uses his talents for the good of many. There's the outlaw. That's another very very common one. The bad boy or the bad girl, the one who operates just outside the rules. Often there's something very likable about this archetype. There's someone who's daring, who's bold enough to tell the established order, the hegemony. It's like, okay, no, I don't want to play by those rules. So often in our stories, what we'll find is, we're identifying with characters like this. And the, what should I say there? When the particular character is really resonating with us, it's probably because we've got a lot of that archetype coming out in our personality. So it's kind of fun sometimes just to look at how these archetypes are, how they manifest, what they do, or what they basically it's how they guide us to do the things that we do, how they guide us, how they shape our worldview. And of course, you can have a lot of, it's like one personality is not just one of these archetypes. I mean, the personality is basically all of these archetypes, acting harmoniously, or sometimes inharmoniously, or in the case of neuroses and things. But oh my God, I've got a lot of messages. Anyway, right. So the archetypes are kind of situated in between the kernel of who we are, which is the self, the self that is immersed in this huge collective unconscious of everyone who's ever been. These archetypes have been the way we've made sense of the world, and maybe the way we've made sense of events and our interactions with others for all of human evolution. That's why it's so easy to tell them in stories, and we all sort of, regardless of the culture, we're talking about Australian Aborigines, just the most civilized of Europeans. It's like we all have the same stories and the same characters in them. So it's just the way we make sense of the world. So anyway, all these aspects of us are then sort of around the center self, which is the self emerged in all of human existence. Then on the outside, you've got the ego. Now the ego is not exactly the ego is not a bad thing. It's like often the ego gets a bad rap. When we talk about selfishness, when we talk about conceit, those things, we think of, well, that's it's just being egotistical. Yeah. Well, ego, as it were, just means I. The word I. And that also is an archetype, because it's a composite of everything that we've made up of, what we've been educated, our culture, it's our identity, essentially. The identity, of course, is on the persona. A persona was that particular, type was called that specifically because that's what it is. It's a mask. We have the face that we present to the world. It's how we want to see ourselves and how we want others to see us. And it's also how others actually do see us. So they see this mask, which changes according to what company one is in. The persona then is sort of the flip side of a very important archetype, an archetype that we don't like to consider, but it is essential for us to do. And that is the shadow. The shadow is aspects of ourselves, characteristics in ourselves, known or unknown to us, that we do not want to display to the world. In fact, we avoid at all costs displaying those bits of our character to the world. Like all things that we do that we'll do only whenever there's no one else around. You know, um, and now I'm seeing Teddy. Anyway, hello. So anyway, I'm not sure if I've been particularly clear about this. The archetypes, such as I was beginning with, are patterns of characteristics. It's like there is, they aren't things. They're just ways in which we can recognize, particular patterns of behavior, particular ways of, taking up an exploit, our approach to things, our approaches in interactions with other people. There are several of these that have basically modeled, who human beings are today, which we share with just about everyone else. And that's because these archetypes are all part of our character. That part of ourself, which is our actual consciousness, is within the scope of these, because otherwise it would find no expression. Through these archetypes, we get to the ego, and that is where the self is actually expressing itself as a being in the world. That then, of course, we've got the face that we present to the world, and then we've got everything that we like to stick in the background because we do not want anyone to think that we are like that. We don't want anyone to think. I mean, I'm just going to give some very mundane examples. There are some which are not so mundane. I mean, we've all got the capacity to be Hitler, and we've all got the capacity to be, Gandhi. Those are extremes. But then, sometimes we let our house get messy, and of course, if somebody's coming over, well then we're going to scurry about cleaning it up because we want them to think that we want them to think that it is always like that. Or, when we're alone, we pick our noses. When we're alone, we'll scratch our backsides, that sort of thing. These are just things that we relegate to the back end, the shadow of who we are. It's really interesting because in the philosophy that will look at humor, it's like most of the things that we find funny are often, our shadows communicating with one another. What do we find funny? We find, other people's stupidity, sex, and, toilet humor. Those are the kinds of things that, we tend to chuckle about. Let's admit it. It's usually because we can all identify with, these things, these aspects in life, although we don't present them. Anyway, that's really all I had to do to expose the subject, and now we're going to entertain, any questions or comments, or it's like, how do you see it? Alan?
Yes, hello? At this point, if anybody wants to talk, you have to open and
Excuse me. Hey, Josh, I'll call you back in a little while, alright? Okay, cheers. Bye.
so I'm curious, which archetype do you feel that you fit in?
I'm I'm sorry, can you read the end of the question?
I said, which archetype do you personally feel you fit into the most?
All of them. I mean, we've all got all of the archetypes already in us. That's the thing. There are almost none of the archetypes that we have not been exposed to. And it's, I don't know, I don't really like to borrow terms from different disciplines, but it's like an epigenetic thing. It's going to depend on the environment one finds oneself in, the context, the social situation, what is going to come out. Because on one hand, in one case, one may very well be the caregiver archetype. It might, someone might elicit such a genuine empathy in us that we really want to, make, that other person's needs exceed my own. And so, and in another, well, there may be the innocent, whereas where you contextually find yourself in a situation where you've got to give someone else your trust. That can either be, like I said, the archetypes they have positive and negative poles. So, when, say, the innocent is, he's, childlike wonder and trust, but then it can also be pitiful. So there's that. There's no real way of answering the question. Like, for instance, probably the archetype that I'm embodying right now, or archetype that is, manifesting through this, is that of the sage. Someone who's sort of a seeker of truth and, ways of perceiving, particular truths, or even questions what truth even is. So, right at this moment, that's quite likely the archetype that's, coming out in my character. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you answered the question.
I mean, the thing I want to get across here, I want to be clear about this, is that we have, it's not evenly distributed, but we have all the archetypes already in our psyches, just from the simple fact that we were born human beings. Dogs and cats might have different mythological figures, I don't know, but the human beings seem to all have the same ones. So the names that we give to these archetypes, have several different names. I mean, they could be called anything. It's like there's also the warrior, which, one who's either the brave defender or the assailing, or the savage assailant. Either the civilized defender or the invading barbarian. Those are both, the poles of the warrior archetype. And a lot of people like to identify with that, certainly in Jediism, the idea of the Jedi warrior, guided by the Force, guided by the light. But then he's got someone who wants to cling to that sort of archetype. That's perfectly fine. If that's the ideal. It's just that we've got to be very, very careful as to know intimately the dark side of that. Because if you think that if you're constantly trying to defend what is good and right, it is, just by enantiodromia, you're going to turn into a villain. Okay, Teddy, this is what I was explaining. You say what archetype you are, but then you're all of them. That's the thing. These archetypes are manifestations in the human psyche. We have, we've already been exposed to all of them, and it's going to be just various social contexts that are going to make manifest in us one or more of these archetypes predominantly over any of the others. But then they're all there. So it's just going to require the right social environment for the appropriate archetype to manifest itself. Does that make sense? These archetypes aren't something that we can. They aren't really patterns that we conform to consciously. It comes from an unconscious source, which is human evolution.
So I have a question from Pride Rock. He or she, I'm sorry, I don't know gender, says, what self-reflective questions would we ask these particular instances to see what archetypes are out in front?
Oh. I think they depend on the feeling of, is what is motivating you. I mean, because if you reflect on yourself in a particular, in a current now situation, and you feel like you really want to help someone, well then there's evidently, sort of a caretaker or a maternal figure, which is that's being modeled there. But then you're only probably going to get there by self-reflection, seeing what you're actually motivated to do. To think back later then, okay, well this is, the manifestation of, the caretaker or the mother or one can probably do this retrospectively a little bit easier than you can do it, in a particular moment. I mean, you're probably not going to, when you're interacting with people, well, then it would be a little bit distracting to sit there and think, what sort of archetype am I portraying now? And not only would it would also be kind of pretentious. But that's what the persona is made of. The persona, is that bit of the ego which we like to identify with. So as long as our values are well cultivated, well then we're probably going to be displaying, the positive aspects, or at least, not so much negative ones of, the archetypes. Although that can get messed up too, like in the case of, really people who are really militant for a cause. Well then, they want to go out, instead of, promoting the cause, well then they will, they will sling poo at, anyone who disagrees with them. That would be the positive and negative aspects of the warrior archetype. Excuse me while I pour a cup of tea. Oh, please ask me questions. I love questions. Now, I would like to ask a question. Did you understand what I was telling you? Because it can be a little bit, it's very conceptual. It's very symbolic. These aren't, we do have images of these things, and everyone's kind of got their own image. These are the characters that we've heard about in mythology and in our fairy tales, and we've enjoyed these stories as children, and these stories have inspired us to play. Now, what's interesting here, we're talking about self-reflective, what self-reflective act can take to know what archetypes are coming about? That's a brilliant question, because probably what we have to do is get back to a more childlike, a more playful approach to life. That's why it's more important to be sincere than to be serious. When we, serious, we take our identities very seriously, and our identities are just a mask. Essentially, we're playing roles every day, and of course, the role that we play, which archetypes we're going to let come forth, or which archetypes we need to manifest, well then, it depends on the role that we find ourselves playing in any particular social environment. Just like the office, things get quiet, it's a little bit dull, and so, might decide to, do a prank on someone. Well, that's the trickster coming out of it. And it's not to be mean, it can be, but the positive pole of the trickster, the joker, is kind of liven things up, trying to break the monotony. To do something which is out of the ordinary, because out of the ordinary is what's interesting. Sort of the opposite of the everyman. The trickster is the one who kind of gets your attention, whereas the everyman who wants to blend into the woodwork. But isn't that what we were doing too? Whenever we, as school children, well, we'd get to class on the first day, and we'd take a seat as near to the back as we could. That's kind of the everyman not wanting to stand out. So this is what I was saying before. It's like we don't. It's not like we've got to get access to a particular type of archetype, to a particular archetype. We already have all of them. It's just how can we manifest one over another, and it's going to depend on which one's needed. And then of course that's going to come out, and it's also going to be a little bit blocked by the mask, by our identity, what we want to identify with, what we want. Sometimes the things that are just devotionite or thrownness, we have those as parts of our identity, and we didn't choose them, we couldn't choose them, and we can't choose different ones. We were all born somewhere to particular parents, in a particular culture. We were raised a particular way. We had particular ideas presented to us. We've all been teenagers, and we've all kind of had to try to find ourselves, try to create an identity. But then I'm sorry.
Oh no, what we're trying to agree with you. Right. I was just, what we're saying, but like I understand you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. What was it? I'm sorry, I didn't understand. What was that?
You were saying you understand you and he agrees.
Oh, okay. Cheers, Eddie. So anyway, what was I on about? Yeah, but anyway, I just wanted to, it's kind of, it's easier to recognize them retrospectively. But then, what guide our behaviors all the time, it's going to depend on, which social context we find ourselves in. Okay, the persona is the ego identity. It's, the things that we put in what we present to the world. That might change a little bit, but then there's some things that don't. Like, we're we're educated, we're a particular, social professional category, and these things we can see right away. They're not real. They're just, parts of how our social organization works. But they become part of that ego identity. I'm an accountant, or I'm a teacher, or I'm a Jedi even. That's just another ipsetic aspect, which is just it's sort of like, well, as with the persona, well, then it's painted, it's decorated, and that's our identity, is our decoration. It has nothing really to do with who we are, because we've got to get down to who we are and to the self. Well, then we've got to go through all the things that we've been conditioned and educated and taught and sometimes threatened to be. We've got to get past the things that we will not present to the world because it's either inappropriate or would get us in a lot of trouble. And then see how the archetypes go, what's making us, be a particular way. Even the shadow is imbued with all the archetypes. It's all the negative elements of, everything else which, we kind of like to see ourselves being. Someone who's 50 can easily become someone who's miserly. Then, of course, once all those archetypes are integrated, well then, you get down to the kernel of actually who we are, the consciousness of self, the one who's, the I that is not even objectifiable. There is no me to that I. It's just that aspect of the self which is buried in the collective unconscious, that is just filling its part in, human evolution. So I think I'm going to end with that because that was a pretty bold statement there. But that's the way I've come to see it after way too many books and not enough tea.